The Master Duel meta tier list post Blessings of Nature. I'm going to be giving you guys what do I think of these particular decks post this format, and let's see exactly if I come out correct as the format develops, or did I miss a couple of things. Of course, if you guys think that a strategy should be a little bit higher or a little bit lower, go ahead and let me know down below in the comment section. And if there is a strategy that I missed, go ahead and let me know as well. I have 5 different categories. Diamond 1 decks are the best of the best. Great contender decks are decks that you'll probably see in Diamond or in Plat, but are a little bit less likely to be seen. Great potential are strategies that I think coming into this format will be really good. Takes a really good pilot are strategies that you must know exactly what you're doing to be very successful with. And then a real challenge. Somebody in chat said, your mama said, be in the house before the street lights come on. That is the type of struggle, especially if you're like a couple of miles out and you're like, the street lights are starting to come on. It feels like that. It's going to be a real challenge to make it to Diamond with it. I think every single one of these decks could be pretty good in the right hands. And I can't wait to see what do you guys have to say when you send your decks in, or your replays when you send your decks in. I would say ABC is still a real challenge. I did see someone on the last tier list say that ABC is really good with Therion. The problem with that is that Therion is just better by itself, and ABC isn't necessarily a very powerful deck on its own. Keep in mind, Blessings of Nature doesn't really do anything for the ABC strategy, and it is a fairly inconsistent strategy. Unfortunately, I'm going to leave it in real challenge, though I do think some great ABC players can do some things. At Emancipator, I would say, because the Vernal Sylph cards become a little bit better, possibly. The biggest thing that I don't like about the Vernal Sylph cards is that they will lock you into only being able to activate Earth monsters, but they don't necessarily stop you from making some of those other cards. You just can't activate their effects. Meaning cards like Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess will become live on the next turn, which is really, really good. And saying that there's some great Earth monsters that you can go into, I don't think that it'll be a bad deck, but overall, Emancipator has never really been a bad deck for quite some time. I'm going to actually make a bold take. I don't think that Branded is a Diamond 1 Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I think it's a pretty solid contender. Now, Branded Tearlament might be a thing, and that's actually a fairly good deck. But Branded as a pure deck may be a little bit harder to play than Branded Tearlament. Overall, I do think that you'll have to deal with the extra deck issue because Branded already needs a decent amount of space in the extra deck, and so does Tearlament. But I think this will be a solid deck to be able to play in Master Duel, and is still a fairly solid contender. Amazons, unfortunately, we went over the Amazons cards in the selection pack together on stream. Be sure to catch me on stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday. This is worse than ABC if you were to ask me. It's a harder challenge than ABC. My biggest problem with Amazons is that it doesn't do anything necessarily correctly. I think my girl Foxy, she told me that the Amazoness monsters took all of the problems that Tearlament should have. It took all of the drawbacks, because the drawbacks on this strategy is ridiculously bad. Though it is a really, really fun deck to see, and I would love to see a replay on it, destroying one of the top decks and showing me wrong, because this is one of my childhood favorite decks. Blue Eyes, guys, you should already know you're a real challenge, my guy. Look, if you're making it to Diamond 1 in Blue Eyes, I think you're one of the better players in Master Duel, because the best version that I've seen this deck being played is Blue Eyes Jet Dragon Control, which could be played in different routes to be successful. Same thing with Dark Magician. I think we've seen a Dark Magician player, because we get hundreds of replays all of the time. We've seen one Dark Magician player win. I am not overestimating it. I think we've maybe seen 2 Blue Eyes players win. So these aren't necessarily terrible decks, but in the wrong hands, they're bad. And in the right hands, they're still a very hard challenge. Ignister, I think Ignister has some good potential. It's a cyber strategy. We're not into the Bestials just yet. This is a really solid Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that can go places. I think it's just a really good deck. And of course, as long as we have Cyber's cards and hand traps, this will probably always be good. You just don't want to go against Max C. Dinos, which is really weird. In Master Duel, we have 3 Soul Eating Overraptor. We have 3 Dino Wrestler Pankratops. We have the 3 Fossil Dig. We have the 3 Misk. And this is still and really takes a good pilot. I want to be wrong. I want to say that this deck has great potential. But so far, even with all of those, we have not consistently seen Dinos in the high level events. It's just really, really perplexing. But I do think that Dino would probably be a better going second OTK type deck. Dinomorphia, I'm like, I probably would say that it's closer to, yeah. I don't think that Dinomorphia is better than Dinos. I think if you're going to pick both decks, if you were a Dino player, you're going to want to play Dinos because Dinos have so much more to it. Dinomorphia itself doesn't seem like a terrible Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but once you start to play and climb the ladder, you realize that going second isn't as much as you wanted, and going first isn't as much as an obstacle for your opponent to break. It's not a bad deck. It's probably the better deck in a real challenge, but it is a real challenge. Dragon Link will probably always be good. This deck still has Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon, which is crazy, right? And overall, can search hand traps like Effect Veiler. I see Effect Veiler being really, really good alongside Infinite Impermanence against tier limits. And while Nibiru may be on the cusp because of tier limit Ru Kalos, it's still a searchable card with this deck. This deck is always just a really solid Yu-Gi-Oh deck to play. Drytron, I would also say, has a lot of great potential. Being able to summon Vanity's Ruler against the tier limit strategy, low-key can be an FTK. Drytron is almost like Dragon Link, where you get so many complex ways to play the deck, and you can play so many great things for the deck, you can continue to make it good. Outlich. The Ishizu cards, I would say, really, really hurt Outlich. The Ishizu cards hurt Drytron, admittedly, but not as much as I would say it hurts Outlich. Players already know if you can just get rid of Outlich to Golden Lord, and I do expect more cards like DD Crow to be played just a little bit more, then you're in a really good advantage against Outlich. It's just not a great deck right now. It's a little too slow. Live Twin Sprite, if you were to ask me, is a great contender. Live Twin by itself is a real challenge. I don't think that this deck offers anything that the Live Twin Sprite version doesn't offer you except more outside of its Link 4 monster. So if I'm going to say Live Twin Sprite, I'm easily going to put it in great contender. Exo Sister is brimming with potential. My biggest beef with Exo Sister right now is when we get tier limits, are players going to lean into graveyard manipulation? And if they do, it's a great contender deck. But if we get a monkey wrench into the equation where players aren't lying on graveyard heavy manipulation, then Exo Sister does become a little bit weaker. But overall, it has great potential to be possibly even the Diamond 1. But for right now, I would just say great potential because it really depends on how the format shapes. This is one of those decks that has to check for that. Floowandereeze takes a really good pilot. Glue Eaters cannot play Floowandereeze. Like, you actually got to think now. And even in the TCG, players are starting to realize that Floowandereeze is just more than Barrier Statue, which is banned in all three platforms, OCG, TCG, and Master Duel. But this deck, right now, I wouldn't consider it. Maybe if Graveyard Reliance becomes good, because a Dimension Shifter can be played in both of these decks and can hit a lot of the top decks. But other than that, it's one of those situations. Grass, I'm going to make a bold take. I don't think Grass is good. So we went over the tier limit strategy. A lot of players were saying just play tier limit Grass. If you open full combo for tier, you can send up to 24 cards off of your deck. That's more than half. Like that's legitimately all you need. And with the current hits to tier limit, a Grass version gives you the opportunity to miss out on your Primitive Planet Perlino if you mill it or you don't see it as much. I think that Perlino is one of the central pieces for the deck and is the reason why tier limit can be so good, because in the recovery and grind game, Perlino puts in work. And I think that you might want to see that as much as possible. Crawlers, I think crawlers are better. I've seen so many crawler B-Trooper decks. I've seen crawler decks. I'm maybe coping. I think this is another bold take. I'm going to put it in takes a really good pilot, because I actually do believe in crawlers in a bust-to-one situation where your opponent can't just side in cards to be able to wipe you out. And seeing that players aren't playing cards to wipe this deck out because no one sees it coming, I think that the correct pilot can do some things with it. Labyrinth, ironically, actually has great potential. We were talking about Labyrinth a little bit earlier, and I know there was a mention that Labyrinth gets exponentially worse because it didn't get anything, but it actually got a little bit better. Labyrinth is... Oh, wait, hold on. We don't have We don't have Labyrinth Mommy Milkers yet. Because I was going to say Labyrinth can search different Dimension Ground. And different Dimension Ground is a killer to all of the decks. But it can also search other cards. We don't have Lady Labyrinth. Well, we do have Lady Labyrinth. We don't have the other Labyrinth monster. It escapes my mind right now. But once that card comes out, it being able to search Dimensional Barrier is pretty good. But even outside of that, no Lady Labyrinth, my apologies. Even outside of that, using Trap Tricks to search different Dimension Ground and not having the same weaknesses as some of the other strategies, it is a benefit for this deck. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a lot of potential. Earth Machine, even with the new Vernal Sylph support, I would say that it takes a really good pilot, mainly because you don't have a way to out-max C. And once they max C you give them so many cards, it's ridiculous. Now, maybe a pure Machina Vernal Sylph version that can stop when being prompted with max C would be a little bit stronger. But if we were going to play a control deck, Exo Sister just seems a little bit stronger. Madolche, I'm going to say Madolche is a great contender. The Vernal Sylph cards really help Madolche, but Madolche is secretly one of the only decks that can play the Ishizu engine and get to the shufflers as fast as possible, while also being able to use the fairy cards for its own benefit. This deck is sneakily good. It can play Dimension Shifter. So if the format does become very, very graveyard reliant, this is a deck that can play in Search Dimension Shifter. If the format becomes tier reliant, it can play Ishizu shufflers to shuffling your opponent at the most inopportune opportunities. I think that this deck, as opposed to its TCG counterpart, is in a lot better position now. The only problem I would say would be consistency. I think that would be Madolche's biggest problem right now, would be consistency. And it's an OTK deck. So gotta love those OTK decks. Marine Cess, I think Marine Cess is still a solid Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I wouldn't put it in Diamond 1 decks. And this could be a little bit of cope because this doesn't get anything for it. Like ridiculously nothing. But it's still just a solid deck where hand traps can help carry you. Even if the format becomes more graveyard reliant, I would still say Heroes take a really good pilot because you're going first approach. Being able to set up a Destiny Hero Plasma and Master Duel Dark Law is like an FTK against Tier Limit. It's an FTK against graveyard reliant decks. But how much do you guys trust that is going to be the winning board for you? I don't trust it enough. I would say, well, I kind of do trust it, just not enough. Oh, yeah. Hold on, because that's, how do you crack that? Yo, how do you crack that? If you go first with Heroes and you set up Plasma Dark Law, how do you crack that? Super Poly is at 3, so that's how you crack that. But outside of Super Poly, holy, I think there's a little bit more potential. I don't think that players will be playing Raigeki because of tier limit. I think that there's a little bit more potential for this deck than players are giving it credit. I think it's solid, though I do think it could drop to take a really good pilot because hero players can be glue eaters. Mathmech, I still think is a Diamond 1 deck. The biggest thing about Mathmech is that it can ignore and play through so many situations and still OTK. So it has a great matchup against everything. Tier limit, it's okay. If tier limit starts playing shit all cards, then the whole game's fucked, guys. We're just all screwed. But outside of that, Mathmech can be pretty good. Melfi Sprite, I think is another Diamond 1 deck. Melfi by itself, I would say takes a really good pilot. Now, the reason why I think Melfi Sprite is so good is because Herald of Arclight. And Herald of Arclight could force tier elements into a situation where they just can't play Yu-Gi-Oh! Because they can't send from the deck to the graveyard or send from the hand to the graveyard. They won't be able to fuse, which is literally a clap up. And then you have your regular Sprite cards. I think Sprite's biggest weakness when it came out to Master Duel is that it didn't have a strong inboard with Totally Awesome being banned. And the Melfi cards really help in that department. Plunder Patrol 100% takes a really good pilot. It does not get better in this format, but it doesn't necessarily get worse. I would say Punk is still fairly good. It's just a solid Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck that doesn't care about what's going on in the meta. Plus, tons of hand traps can also help. Rika in the TCG was like a huge counter to Tier Limit. This might be here. This might be here. But Rika's such a good counter because you can contribute whatever your opponent has to do and then keep playing. Like, it's really, really good. Like, it's ridiculously goated right now. Like, this is good. Runic has lost a lot of its touch. If you're pure Runic, then I don't think you're winning too many games, especially with the floodgate hits and stuff like that. If you're playing Runic inside of a particular deck, I don't see where you would play Runic Sprite over playing Runic Melfi, over playing Runic Live Twin. And I can't think of any other Runic decks that could work right now. You know what I mean? Like, I can't see another Runic deck that will work. Right now, I would not advise in playing Runic right now in any particular deck. You could deck out in the Shizu deck if they send half their deck to the graveyard, but I think that's the only benefit. I would think that it'd be a real challenge just fitting Runic into other strategies that will work, right? Scareclaw? Scareclaw definitely takes a really good pilot. Like, there's nothing that Scareclaw has right now. I will say, though, in the tier limit matchup, since tier limit doesn't go into huge link monsters, you'll see builds that do have huge link monsters, and you'll see builds that don't have huge link monsters. If they don't go into huge link monsters, this deck it's a clapping is happening. It's a really good deck against that particular matchup. Sprite, we already know, is a Diamond 1 deck. Spyro, I think, takes a really good pilot. Way too many lines to be able to consistently win. Swordsoul, I think Swordsoul is not a bad deck. It probably goes in to take a really good pilot. And that's just because Swordsoul is just a really linear deck that's easy to learn and hard to master. Its interactions with some of the other decks into the meta aren't necessarily bad. The Ishizu cards do help you, but the shufflers do, they put you down. Of course, Tier Limit is a Diamond 1 deck, though there are people claiming that Tier Limit will be the best deck in the entire game. Like, hands down, it'll be a Tier 0 format, play Tier Limit or bust. I don't think that that's true. I think that Tier Limit will be a fairly powerful deck, kind of like how Sprite is, but won't be the dominant force inside of the game. Tribrigate is not bad. I don't think that Tribrigate will be extremely good, though. It doesn't have anything that, like, separates itself from the rest of the deck. Kind of like Swordsoul. It gains stuff from being sent. It loses stuff from being shuffled. It's like, it's okay. It's okay. And lastly, Vernal Sylph. Vernal Sylph is a pure deck I'd say takes a really good pilot. I don't think that it's a bad deck again, but overall, it doesn't give you anything that would be better suited in like a Madolche deck or something like that. But overall, that's pretty much what I have for the meta tier list post Blessing Nature. This was actually a lot of cards to talk about. So, of course, if you guys have an opinion that maybe I may be wrong or right about, maybe I see people arguing in chat that this should be here, and it could possibly be true. Let me know down below in the comment section what you think. And, of course, check out some other amazing content for more amazing videos.